Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Welcome, dear listeners, to Scary Stories Told in the Dark. I'm Malcolm Blackwood, your host and storyteller. And you know, where I'm from, we don't do bedtime stories. So, if that's what you were expecting, you're in the wrong place. If it's terrifying tales you're after, well, then I've got just the thing. So, get comfortable, settle in, turn off the lights, if you dare. Your night is about to get a whole lot darker. Besides, who needs sleep anyway? Good evening, dear friends, and welcome once again to Scary Stories Told in the Dark, the podcast where familiar comforts sour, where laughter curdles into screams, and where every portrait, pie, or promise may conceal a madness all its own. I'm Malcolm Blackwood, your host and narrator. Tonight's episode is a very special one because all four of our tales come from the same author, Jason A. Jones, a rising voice in indie horror whose unsettling style has been captivating readers worldwide. Each of tonight's stories can be found in his brand new collection, The Pumpkin Pie Man, 19 terrifying tales of horror and the supernatural, published by our partners at Velox Books and released just last month. Available now on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook editions. It's already drawing rave reviews, with readers calling Jones's writing absolutely wonderful, quick and creepy, and reminiscent of the scary stories we used to whisper at sleepovers. So, pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, and settle in. Tonight's stories will remind you that what looks like a warm smile may hide a knife, that portraits can demand worship, that survivors are sometimes haunted most of all, and that even the machines we trust may one day write us out of our own lives. Before we begin, a reminder, if you'd like to enjoy scary stories told in the dark without interruptions, with early access to every new episode, and with exclusive bonus tales you won't hear anywhere else, join us in the patrons area. Membership is just $7.99 a month, or less with an annual plan, and it unlocks an ever-growing library of audio nightmares. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com or chillingtalesfordarknights.com to learn more. Your support doesn't just keep this show alive, it keeps the horrors coming. Now, let's begin. Our first tale tonight takes us back to small-town America in the early 1970s. In it, a smiling man in a white panel van promises sweet holiday comfort with his fresh-baked pies. But his sugary sales pitch conceals something far more sinister, and one family will discover that not all traditions are meant to be savored. I give you The Pumpkin Pie Man by Jason A. Jones. A few days before the Thanksgiving holiday, in November of 1972, a crisp autumn breeze caressed the little town of Whispering Woods, when the Pumpkin Pie Man, as he would be known by everyone as the Thanksgiving holiday came to a close, drove through it, his little white panel truck trudging along the stretch of road that headed into the sleepy town. He threw an occasional smile and wave of the hand as he went down Cherry Street. Most of the kids were out of school for the week, and many were out and about, riding their bikes and playing at the local playground. The Pumpkin Pie Man stopped near a cul-de-sac near the Jenkins place on Waverly Road. The playground was just across the way. He waved his hand and called out of the driver's side window. "Hey," he said. Some of the children looked his way and stared. They'd never seen a car, or truck for that matter, that had a piece of pumpkin pie painted on the side of it, with a dollop of whipped cream on top. A freakish, smiling cartoon character held it in its hand with the words, "It's good," hovering above in a word balloon. Just right above the word balloon with the words, "The Peddler's Pie Shop and Eatery," in black lettering. He opened the truck door and climbed out. A few kids had already made their way toward him. He smiled. "Hey, boys and girls, my name is Tom Wilson, and I've got a question for you." He licked his lips and moved his eyes from side to side, observing his audience. "Do you think any of your parents would like a delicious pumpkin pie to go along with their Thanksgiving meal?" Some of the children looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. He knew this was going to be a long day. He needed to make his quota in order to get his holiday bonus. He continued, "I not only have pumpkin, but I have cherry, apple, blueberry, blackberry. I've got so many, a huge list." "My mom makes our pies," one of the children, Roy Childers, yelled from the back of the small crowd that had gathered. Little heads began to nod in agreement. "I'm sure she does, my little man, and I'll bet they're the best along this block. But wouldn't you want to see your mom enjoying something that perhaps she didn't have to slave over and make? You know, give her a rest on this holiday. She'll probably be doing a ton of cooking anyway for your family, am I right?" he asked as he gave a hard pat on the side of his truck. Roy shook his head and said, "Maybe." It did make sense to his 10-year-old brain. "Sure she would. Now, how about you kids do this guy a favor and tell your moms and dads about me? I'll be around all day, going up and down this street as well as through some other neighborhoods." He grinned as little smiles formed on the kids' faces. The pumpkin pie man got into his truck as many of the children made their way back to the swing sets and merry-go-rounds. He turned the ignition and started to drive down the block toward another area of town. He looked into the rearview mirror, the children growing smaller in the distance. He straightened up his black bow tie and adjusted in his seat, unbuttoning his white milkman-style suit jacket. He pulled out a cigar from his shirt pocket, swirling the tip around in his mouth. Yes, it was going to be a long day, he thought, but a good one. Roy Childers ran into the house, out of breath, nearly slamming into his grandmother, Josephine, who was visiting for the holiday from Cleveland. She happened to turn around just as Roy ran past her, trying to get to his mom, Marjorie, who was doing some early prep work for Thanksgiving. "Hey, Mom!" Roy exclaimed, although there was a definite chill in the autumn air. His forehead was wet with sweat, and rightfully so, as he had run all the way from the playground. "Calm down, son. What's going on? Something wrong?" She wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and then ran one through her son's hair. Roy finally began to settle down. "No, nothing's wrong. There was a pumpkin pie man at the playground who was selling all kinds of pies," he said. "Pumpkin pie man? Pies?" his mom asked. "Yeah, you know, the kind you eat." Roy rolled his eyes. He hoped his mom wouldn't see that. "The man wanted us to let you know," Roy continued. "I could take some of my allowance and buy one. That way you wouldn't have to slave over a stove all day. Wouldn't you like that?" His mom laughed. "That's awful sweet of you, Roy, but you know I always make my own desserts. You always like them more than anyone." "Did someone say desserts?" Stanley Childers walked through the front door from the garage, his hands dirty from working on an engine block. "You're not getting anything with those nasty hands of yours," Marjorie chortled. Stanley strolled up to his wife, pretending to rub his hands all over her, and quickly planted a kiss on her cheek. His lips were dry and weather-beaten. She wiped her face furiously with her hand. He chuckled as he went into the bathroom. Marjorie turned her attention from her idiotic husband to her son. "So, as I was saying, it's homemade from here on out. Okay, partner? Why don't you go back outside and play?" "Okay." Roy looked defeated as he made his way toward the front door, but soon his dismay turned to pleasure as Jay Plymouth and Randy Gilman rode up to his front steps and asked if he wanted to ride bikes. As they made their way across Cherry Street toward Fletcher Avenue, they passed the Whispering Woods Cemetery, and up the street from there, a white panel truck sat, its driver taking long drags from a cigar. Wednesday, November 22nd. On the morning before Thanksgiving, with much of the prep work done, Marjorie sat down and reached for the Whispering Woods Reporter that lay in front of her on the coffee table. She unrolled it and quickly noticed the front page headline, "Family of 4 dead at 112 Waverly Road." "That's just a few blocks over," Marjorie said, her flesh prickling beneath her bathroom robe. She jumped as the telephone rang in the kitchen. "Hello?" Marjorie said. Janice Bakley was on the other end. "Did you see the paper this morning?" Janice asked frantically. "I just saw it. It has to be the Jenkins family." Janice continued. "I drove past there this morning on my way to the A&P, and yeah, it was them. The police have the whole area sectioned off with crime scene tape. You know, that yellow stuff they always use on those detective shows." Marjorie was dumbfounded. The whole reason for moving to Whispering Woods was to get away from the hustle and bustle of the big city and perhaps give Roy a normal childhood in a crime-free area. Murder in a small town? She knew it could happen, but why? And why the Jenkins family? She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Stanley. "Janice, I need to go. I need to talk to my husband." Marjorie hung up the phone in the cradle and turned toward him. She was trembling. "What's wrong?" Stanley asked groggily. "You need to look at the paper," she said, her eyes fighting back tears. "I just can't believe it," Stanley said as he clenched the paper tightly, slightly shaking. The paper went on to identify the victims as 40-year-old Tom Jenkins, 35-year-old Samantha Jenkins, and 12-year-old Rachel Jenkins. Stanley had worked with Tom for the past 10 years. "Perhaps we should cancel Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow?" Marjorie said, her arms folded in front of her chest to gain some warmth. She suddenly felt a chill on her skin. Stanley put down the paper and walked toward his wife, putting his arms around her. "No. Let's celebrate tomorrow anyway. The police probably have this under control. We need to be vigilant, though. We don't know who's out there." "Where's Roy?" Stanley asked as he headed toward the bedroom to put on some clothes. "I let him stay over at the Gilmans last night. I'm sure he'll be okay." Marjorie looked out of the kitchen window at some of the homes on her street. She thought about the worst possible scenario of a killer on the loose. She shuddered. While Stanley and Marjorie were trying to make sense of what had happened, Roy Childers and Randy Gilman raced down Waverly Road toward the Jenkins place. They saw the crime scene tape and hit the brakes. Down the street, not too far from them and within hearing distance, a white panel truck sat. Roy glanced over his shoulder and saw it. "Hey, it's the pumpkin pie guy," Randy said. They both took off on their bikes toward him. He waved at them, his eyes covered with dark sunglasses. The sky was overcast. "Hey boys," he called out to them. "Having fun?" The pumpkin pie man stared intensely at the Jenkins house. "Tom Wilson, right?" Roy asked. "You remembered. Good boy." "Have you sold any pies yet?" Roy asked. He wondered why Tom was wearing sunglasses. "Not a lick. Have you talked to your mom and dad about it?" he asked, lighting a cigar. As he flicked a matchstick and held the flame up to the cigar, Roy couldn't help but notice a strange flash beneath the sunglasses, as if his eyes were milky. "I did," Roy responded. "But Mom said she was making everything for tomorrow's dinner, even the dessert." "Ah, okay. I really gotta sell these pies, boys. They're gonna go bad if I don't." He looked toward the windshield at the Jenkins house, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. He clenched his teeth together, biting his cheek. He could taste blood. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Wilson," Roy said. "So am I, Roy. So am I." "It's a shame," Tom Wilson said. "Hey, I got an idea. I could come by your house later on today and ask your mom myself. How does that sound?" He grinned a smile that made both boys fidget on their bicycle seats. "You can try, I guess," Roy said, to the delight of the panel truck driver. "You live around here?" Tom asked. "See the playground over there? I live 3 houses down from it," Roy said, pointing and waving cigar smoke away from his face. The driver nodded his head in acknowledgement and turned the ignition. "Well, boys, I gotta run. I'll see you, Mr. Roy, and your parents pretty soon. Oh, and it'd probably be a good idea not to tell your parents I'm coming by. If they know, then I'll get the door slammed in my face. That's already happened this week." He laughed a hearty laugh and drove away. The boys trekked toward the playground. Wednesday, November 22nd, 2:45 p.m. A knock on the door woke up Stanley Childers from a well-deserved nap. He'd worked most of the week and would only get 2 days off for the holiday. He had grumbled about it to his boss, but his rant had fallen on deaf ears. He approached the front door and opened it. A man in sunglasses stood before him, his hand outstretched. He moved his head from side to side, trying to look around the inside of the foyer, but Stanley's large frame was inhibiting his view. "Can I help you?" Stanley asked. "You may be able to. My name is Tom Wilson, and as you can see from my truck, I'm from a local dessert shop." He dropped his hand when he realized the man before him wasn't going to shake it. "I've never heard of this dessert shop. The only shop I know of is Baker's Dozen over on Kinsey Street." Stanley peered at him through squinty eyes. "Yes, well, I was wondering if perhaps—" Just then, Roy ran down the stairs and jumped in front of his dad. "Hey, Mr. Wilson," he said as Stanley laid a hand on his shoulder. "You know this man?" his dad asked. "Yeah, this is the pumpkin pie man." Through his sunglasses, Tom Wilson's eyes widened and a smile formed on his face, small, yellow-stained teeth filling his mouth. Stanley got a whiff of his breath, which reeked of stale tobacco. "Roy, my boy!" A hand tousled the child's hair. Stanley pulled his son back from the door. "State your business, Mr. Wilson. Roy, why don't you run upstairs, for now?" Stanley kept his eyes on the man before him. "I'll cut to the chase, Mr. Childers. My stock of delicious pies is in desperate need of a home, and I've been all over the place to no avail. Would your wife want to buy a couple? I have pumpkin, apple, and cherry. I also have—" Stanley stopped him in mid-sentence. "Listen, my wife does all of our baking and cooking. She's worked painstakingly for the past few days for our Thanksgiving meal, so I think we'll decline. I'm sorry. Have a good holiday." Stanley started to close the door. "That's what Samantha Jenkins said to me. But after some coaxing, she bought one." He shrugged his shoulders and giggled. "I heard about what happened to them. Such a shame." Stanley felt a huge knot form in his belly. The pumpkin pie man continued. "It would definitely be a shame if I went back to the bakery and I still had all these pies. You sure you don't want 1 or 2? "Like I said, no, thank you." Stanley still felt uneasy as he shut the door in Tom Wilson's face. He looked out of the window and watched as the man got into his truck. Right before he pressed the accelerator, he stole a glance at an upstairs window of the house and saw Roy looking through it. The pumpkin pie man lowered his sunglasses, revealing dead, cloudy eyes. Roy backed away from the glass, stunned, and realized there was a puddle of urine on the floor. Wednesday, November 22nd, 11:44 p.m. A fierce wind blew outside Roy's window as he slept. As the moon took on shadow and light, a faint whisper could be heard outside. "Roy. Roy." He tossed and turned while his eyes were closed, the orbs within his head shifting from side to side underneath the lids. The window crept open. A mist, slow and steady, filled his room until it hovered over him. Suddenly, a bodily presence formed at the foot of his bed. It was tall and thin, and its head tilted to one side. As the moonlight brought natural illumination into Roy's bedroom, the entity's face could be seen. It had a long nose and a slimy, slithering tongue that jutted in and out as if it were probing the air. Its eyes were wide and white, with no pupils, and it smiled a horrid grin full of fangs. Its shadow caressed the floor as it floated toward the head of the bed, and as Roy lay on his back, his eyes closed tightly. The being came close to him and took a deep breath, its long skeletal fingers ever so slightly caressing the boy's cheeks. It began to speak in a low, gravelly voice. "Within my house is the sickening sweet smell of nutmeg and spice. Upon a grave you'll dance as soon as you've eaten a slice. Scream and run as fast as you can. There is no escaping the pumpkin pie man. Take another and eat your fill. It's wormy and cold, and your blood will spill." Roy suddenly opened his eyes to the blackness before him. His window was closed tightly, and he could feel the goose flesh on his body, his pajama top swaddling him. He took it off and fell back onto his pillow. As Roy drifted back to sleep, he began to dream about his family surrounding a dinner table, tied to their chairs, as the pumpkin pie man force-fed each one a piece of pie covered in maggots. Thursday, November 23rd, Thanksgiving Day, 1 p.m. "Roy, please help your grandmother set the table." Marjorie Childers reached into the oven and pulled out a golden brown and delicious turkey, which had been slowly roasting all night long. She'd gotten up every so often in the middle of the night and basted it to perfection. Along with the turkey, there were homemade yeast rolls slathered in butter, corn on the cob, dressing, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce, of course. Josephine had insisted on it. And candied yams. It was the typical Thanksgiving meal, complete with pumpkin pie for dessert. After everything was settled and the family sat down in their respective chairs, Stanley began to carve the turkey, its juices flowing after every slice of the knife. They had a lot to be thankful for, despite the recent tragedy in the neighborhood. Marjorie sat across from Stanley and looked through the kitchen window above the sink. She noticed a man walking up their front steps. "Someone's coming to the door," Marjorie said, as she started to get up from the table. "He's here!" Roy exclaimed as he ran to the door and opened it. Tom Wilson stood in the doorway with a square box in his hands. Stanley could feel his skin crawling off his body. "What's he doing here?" "I invited him." "Without permission," Stanley shook his head and got up from the table. "I told you, we don't want any of your pies." He was stern with the pumpkin pie man, a small vein popping out on his forehead. "I'm sorry about this. I thought the boy had asked you if it was okay. I do have a complimentary pie, though, free of charge. I really need to get rid of them." His eyes appeared to be bloodshot, and he rocked on his heels, waiting for an answer. "Please, Dad, please," Roy begged. Stanley didn't want to disappoint his son. He looked over at Marjorie. She nodded up and down reluctantly. "Please come in," Stanley said. "We'll set a place for you." After the meal, Tom Wilson offered to serve the family a piece of the pie he'd brought as a gift. Although Stanley had protested, he could tell Roy was eager to try it. After all, the way Tom had built up the suspense, he knew one piece wouldn't hurt anybody, and if it would get him quickly out of the house, the better. "Whipped cream?" Tom asked. He surveyed each face that sat around the table and breathed a sigh of relief. He walked around the table and dispensed a dollop on each plate. "You know, I always have a hard time selling these things. I'm awfully glad you all decided to try it. It's all thanks to your sweet little boy here." He stared at Roy as the boy began shoveling the orange goo into his mouth. The rest of the family followed suit. The pie was devoured in a frenzy, and as Josephine took her last bite, she noticed the pumpkin pie man grinning from ear to ear, a low, horrendous laugh beginning to come up from his throat. Soon, he was laughing hysterically as one by one the family started to convulse. He got up from the table and danced around, his clothing falling from his skeletal body. He hunched over and jumped on the table, scuttling like a cockroach. Frothy blood seeped from Marjorie's lips, and she lurched forward, face falling into her empty plate with a thud. Josephine fell backward against her chair, her eyes bleeding. The last thing she saw was the pumpkin pie man looking down on her as she stared at the ceiling with dead eyes. "This is so much fun," the creature said. "I love playing this game every single Thanksgiving. I had a hell of a time at the Jenkins place. You should have seen them writhe and clutch their throats. They didn't have pumpkin, though. They wanted the apple. I stuck razor blades inside that pie." Stanley fell from his chair onto the floor and slowly began to crawl to the front door. Suddenly, the creature was upon him, drool falling from his mouth full of fangs. "Oh, no, you don't," the thing hissed. He pulled Stanley's head up by the hair, its sharp fingernails digging into his scalp. It began to bleed. "The game's not over yet. Look." The monster screamed. Its voice sent a chill up Stanley's spine. He stared helplessly at Roy, hot tears streaming down his face. The creature gurgled in his ear. "You smell the nutmeg? The cloying stench of something sugary and sweet?" Suddenly, a long skeletal finger sliced through Stanley's neck, his eyes rolling back into his head. The entity released him, and his head hit the floor with a bang. Stanley lay there in a crimson pool, his heart steadily pumping blood out of the wound until it stopped. The pumpkin pie man scurried along the floor and nestled beside Roy, who was slumped over in his chair. It lifted the boy's face with gray, bony hands, its white eyes wide and piercing. It whispered, "You're mine now, boy, just like all the others. I would have taken the Jenkins girl, but the blue people came too quickly. But I have you. We have much to do to prepare for next year. A different town, maybe a city perhaps. Who knows?" Tom Wilson adjusted his bow tie, straightened his milkman jacket, and headed for the front door. Roy Childers lay in his arms, his head and feet dangling. The pumpkin pie man opened the back doors to his panel truck and threw the child into it, the body jostling against a pile of small human bones. He slammed the doors shut, felt around his shirt pocket, and pulled out a cigar. He climbed into the driver's seat and turned the ignition. He lit the cigar, slammed the gear shift into D, and drove down Cherry Street, just as the sun began to set. That was The Pumpkin Pie Man by Jason A. Jones, as performed by yours truly. His pies are to die for, and in this case, quite literally. And all of tonight's tales, including this one, come from Jason A. Jones' brand new collection, The Pumpkin Pie Man, 19 Terrifying Tales of Horror and the Supernatural, published by Velox Books. The anthology reminds us that the so-called good old days weren't so innocent after all. Strangers at the door become predators, haunted objects demand blood, and familiar comforts twist into nightmares. Jones knows a thing or two about dark twists. By trade, he's an industrial painter, but his passion has always been horror fiction. He's been steadily carving a name for himself, publishing stories in anthologies and online magazines, as well as releasing several standalone shorts on Amazon. His debut novella, Starving Alice, arrived in June of 2024, and he lives with his wife and 2 cats in central Indiana, writing when the workday ends and the shadows gather. Whether you prefer a cozy paperback, the instant hit of Kindle, the permanence of hardcover, or the immersive terror of an audiobook, The Pumpkin Pie Man is waiting for you now on Amazon. Now then, shall we continue our descent? Our second story tonight turns from pies to portraits, where a family's estate sale find proves to be far more than an antique painting. As devotion curdles into madness and blood seeps into the cornfields, one son discovers that his home is no longer his own. Here is She Waits for Me by Jason A. Jones. I'm trapped. I feel the ever-growing presence of the woman inside my head, inside my room, inside my house. This house is a tomb, a prison. I can't escape, or she'll get me. When darkness falls near my home, there aren't any street lights or any stars in the sky, just cornfields and gravel roads. A few howls from nearby coyotes pierce through the bleakness of it all, but other than that, nothing, just blackness. Old man Preston is usually out planting in his fields, but on this night, the fields are empty except for swaying corn stalks and a single, solitary scarecrow in the middle, staring back at me with hollow, blackened eyes. A few years ago, you'd usually catch me sitting outside during a full moon on nights like this, enjoying a cool breeze, drink in hand. Fritz, my chocolate Labrador, sitting beside me, occasionally barking at a car traveling down the road in front of the house. But not on this night. For a while now, I've only been able to observe on the other side of my window, in my bedroom on the second floor of my house. I have this unquenchable feeling I'm being watched, not by anything outside, mind you, but from within. My skin is utter goose flesh, and my pants are soaked in urine. I'm unable to move, and I can't stop looking through my window. I don't want to turn around and see the thing that has haunted my dreams. She's standing in the hallway, in front of my locked bedroom door. I just know it. I can hear her breathing heavily, and soon it will give way to laughing. I saw them pulling up the gravel driveway, clouds of dust behind them, the car coming to a stop. I saw the trunk open, Dad getting out and racing back there, a huge grin on his face, while Mom struggled to get something out of the back seat. I was in the kitchen preparing a sandwich when Dad called from the front door. "Come outside and help us, James." I didn't hesitate. They were expert shoppers when it came to things like estate sales, yard sales, and flea markets, and I couldn't wait to see what they purchased. "What you got there, Mom?" I asked her as she furiously pulled at a rectangular object. "Will you get this for me? I can't wait for you to see it." Mom's smile could be seen from the moon. She was always at her prettiest when she smiled. Dad removed a box of trinkets from the trunk, set it on the ground, and closed the lid. Once inside, he set the box on the kitchen counter, its overflowing contents spilling over the sides like overgrown vines in a terracotta planter. I walked over to the living room sofa and laid the rectangle, wrapped in butcher paper, on it. Mom sat down beside it and began to reveal what was inside. I couldn't resist this. I paid a little too much, but I figured it'd be a nice addition to the rest of our vintage items. Mom caressed the object a little too obsessively. It was a portrait of an elderly lady cloaked in black against a fiery background. She was holding a skull. I didn't like it at all, but seeing the smile on Mom's face made it okay. "Why, though?" I asked, swallowing a lump that had formed in my throat. "Why not?" she grinned. The next day, it was hanging in our hallway. I've been stuck in this room, just waiting, biding my time until she can get in. I haven't been downstairs to survey the rest of the house. Good thing I have a mini fridge in here. I stocked it about a month ago with soda, but now there's just some cold fried chicken from the kitchen, some cheese, and milk. It's not going to last long. I'm surprised it's lasted as long as it has. I've learned to eat smaller. I'm not sure if and when I'll get out of here. She's banging on the door now. Make it stop. Dear God, make it stop. Thank you, Jesus. It stopped. I'm like a laboratory rat, trapped inside a cage made of treated lumber, brick, and mortar. Mom and Dad's car still sits in the driveway. It doesn't move. It can't move. I miss them. I miss Fritz. I know where they are, though. I've known it for quite some time, and every time I think of it, I shiver fiercely, knowing I'll soon be joining them. I've contemplated letting her in, letting her take me. My only comfort is looking through the window at the fields beyond. I've hoped for a passerby along the road, but alas, no one has ventured through here in weeks. It's as if all time came to a standstill once she took possession. Oh, my God, she's dragging a trash bag into the field. Dad drove a semi for J&D grain. Most days, he'd be gone for hours and wouldn't get home until Mom and I were in bed. Sometimes, I could hear him downstairs, heavy steps upon the linoleum floor in the kitchen, opening the refrigerator door, probably getting a beer or something. A lot of times, the TV would turn on, and if it were a Friday night, he'd fall asleep in his chair. I'd find him curled up in it most Saturday mornings, the empty beer bottle on the floor beside him. On Saturday the 10th, he wasn't there. I happened to look out of the kitchen window. It was 7 o'clock, and he was already sitting on a riding mower, making parallel lines up and down the lawn. I walked out onto the porch and sat on the swing. A gentle breeze hit me as I watched him. I could see a smile on his face as he mowed the grass, a huge set of earmuffs and a pair of safety glasses caressing his head. Eventually, he pulled the tractor into the barn. I figured he was messing around in there because he didn't come out. I heard Mom come out of their bedroom, sleep caressing her eyes, a strange look on her face. Her fingers were gently sliding across the old woman's portrait. "Mom?" "Yes, James?" She didn't look at me. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You know, I did some research. The person in this picture was a She turned her head to face me, and she screamed. What I can see through this window is my only source of refuge. She's out there now, digging a grave, the shovel much too big for her bony skeletal hands. She's scraping the ground, throwing dirt like a wild dog aggressively digging for its bone. The black trash bag is lying beside her. How was she able to drag it? I'm frozen, my eyes in a glassy stare. I can't look away as she's digging more holes. More holes. She's creeping toward the house now. She's staring up at me in the window, smiling, and her stride is graceful as if she's floating on air. I slowly creep up from a crouching position and lock the deadbolt on my door. Mom raced out of the house and ran toward the barn. Within 10 feet of the old hickory tree, she fell to her knees, her eyes staring up into it. What I witnessed that day is still with me, like a festering wound that will never heal. Dad hung from a rope, his mouth agape. Blood and saliva fell from it. The rope was so tight it cut through his skin. His dead, bleeding eyes watched as Mom started to hyperventilate. I grabbed onto her while she sat there and rocked slowly. Turning my head toward the house, I saw a glimpse of someone or something black standing in the open front door. My mind whirled like a tornado, and my skin was clammy. Mom went into herself, and from that moment on, she would get up every morning and kneel before the portrait, her eyes glassy and her mouth frozen into a smile. The words that came out of her mouth were ones of adoration and praise to the old woman. She went nuts. It wasn't too long, though, before she met her demise as well. While I wait, I try to sleep, but it eludes me. I wish Fritz were here with me. I hear his dead bark while I lie in bed. It haunts me. Through the window, I watched as Fritz ran frantically around the front yard, tail furiously wagging. He was darting from side to side, his mouth foaming. The bark was demonic and menacing. Finally, he lay down on the ground, his face looking toward me. I could tell his breathing was labored, his chest rising up and down like a bellows. My fear keeps me from doing anything. It keeps me from unlocking this door and racing downstairs to confront what has been destroying my family. And now, the scarecrow in the middle of the cornfield is gone. And that was what Fritz was seeing. The scarecrow stood over him, looking up toward the sky, its straw-like hands hovering over him. The dog began to contort, his body writhing and bones cracking. My God, I swear I can hear it. Soon, he was dead. His body twisted into a disgusting pretzel-looking thing. I screamed and banged my head on the window. It cracked, and blood began to pool on the ground from a gash on my forehead. The scarecrow was gone. It was attached to the pole in the middle of the cornfield as if nothing had ever happened. It wasn't long before I saw the old woman dragging another black bag out into the field, this one a little smaller. She threw it into the second hole in the clearing, the shovel scraping. Mom was worshipping the portrait like some crazed religious lunatic. It was removed from the hallway and placed in a shrine where the TV once stood in the living room. I noticed small, bloody carcasses surrounding the picture while Mom was on her knees, hands lifted in the air, her body swaying like a snake to the charmer's flute. I couldn't do anything now. She was gone. One night, as I tried to sleep, I could hear her downstairs talking to it. I swear it talked back to her. She was chanting something I didn't recognize, and then I heard her cry. And then all of a sudden, there was laughing. In the middle of the night, I heard the tapping on my bedroom door. "James, it's me." Mom's voice was gravelly. "Will you let me in?" "No," I said with trepidation. "Please come downstairs. She wants to talk to you." Mom started scratching on the other side of the door. I froze. My neck hairs went prickly, and I could feel the dampness in my crotch. "I'm not leaving, James, so you might as well come." I could tell she was getting agitated. Then the banging began. She slammed her body into the door with such force that the walls shook. I ran from my bed and cowered in the corner. "Mom, stop!" Tears began to stream down my face, and I tried to slink back further into the corner, hoping my body would disappear into the wall. Her hands were pounding the door like a hammer hitting nails. I covered my ears to no avail. And then, silence. "James, I'm sorry. I know it's been a little rough since your father left." She said this calmly as if Dad had left for another J&D run. I bit my lip and I could taste the blood. "Just leave me alone," I said, my hands balled into fists. I leaned into the corner and closed my eyes tightly, hoping she would go away. I could hear her cry outside the door. It drifted away as if she were heading downstairs. I slowly got up and walked to the bedroom door. I noticed a faint light from underneath. I opened it and peered out into the hallway. She was gone, but the light was more noticeable in the darkness. It was coming from the living room, I slowly began my descent, even though I could feel the reluctance growing. Candles surrounded the shrine to the portrait. They were all lit, and in the middle of them was Mom. Her eyes were wide, and her mascara was smeared from her tears. She looked up at me as I stood on the bottom step of the staircase and smiled. In the far corner of the living room, in the blackness, where the candles allowed only faint shadows, stood the cloaked woman, her hands outstretched. "Give yourself to her, James." Mom smiled as if she'd been given the keys to the kingdom, a queen sitting on a demonic throne beside this hideous monster. I couldn't move. My feet refused to step off the stairs. "Get away from her, Mom." "You don't understand. The cornfield is just the beginning. Fritz and your dad were just the start of it. You and I are needed now." She bared her teeth in a horrible grin. My skin immediately became goose flesh. "Our family's blood is what she craves. She's done this before. She is a living portrait, and we must bow to her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stopped listening as Mom rambled on incoherently in the candlelight. The old woman stepped away from the darkness and stood directly behind Mom, cold steel gleaming in her hand. I screamed, but it was too late. Blood began to pour from Mom's neck. The old woman ran the steel across it, slicing through. She fell to the floor, and the old woman knelt before her and began to drink from her wound. I stood in horror and vomited. Mom's dead eyes looked toward the ceiling, a crimson pool beginning to form around her. The cloaked woman began licking the floor, running her tongue across Mom's body, which was now covered in blood. Suddenly, the old woman looked at me. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could. "Come here, boy. Take part in this wonderful gift." Her voice was childlike, which gave me the creeps. She slowly began to rise from her position facing me. A deep laugh came out of her throat and blood seeped from her lips. It was then my feet let loose on the step and I raced up the staircase, hitting my bedroom door hard, slamming it shut and locking it. I'm still here, and she is pacing the hallway. I can hear her gentle footsteps caressing the floor. Occasionally, I hear her whisper my name. She taps on the door, rapping her skeletal fingers, the nails scratching at the same time. She dragged Mom out into the cornfield like she did Dad and faithful Fritz. I could hear the scraping of the dirt as she filled the hole. There's one more left. It's mine. I'll need to go to it soon. I'm scared to death. I don't have time to grieve, though. She won't let me. My food is gone now, and my room reeks of excrement. I guess I should go ahead and let her in. She's calling my name, and it's driving me insane. That was She Waits for Me by Jason A. Jones, as performed by yours truly. Some paintings capture moments, others capture souls, and sometimes it's the living who become the portrait's property. If tonight's episode stirred you, pies gone rancid, portraits demanding blood, survivors haunted by loss, and machines that write us out of our own stories, there's even more waiting in the patrons area. There you'll find ad-free extended editions of this show along with exclusive tales you won't hear anywhere else. Membership is just $7.99 a month or less with an annual plan. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com and click Patrons or head straight to chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a member. Support indie horror and step deeper into the dark. If tonight's stories have taught us anything, it's that madness wears many masks. A salesman's smile, a mother's devotion, a father's grief, or even a friendly AI. All can conceal a hunger that demands to be fed. Pie's cool, paintings fade, machines shut down, but the terror they leave behind, that madness never really dies. If you haven't already, subscribe to our parent channel, Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, on YouTube, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a nightmare. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and tell us which of tonight's stories left its mark on you. And once again, our thanks to Jason A. Jones and to our partners at Velox Books for bringing us The Pumpkin Pie Man, 19 terrifying tales of horror and the supernatural. Don't forget to pick up your copy on Amazon. It's brand new, and it proves that the scariest things often begin with the simplest comforts. So remember, when you open the door to a smiling stranger, admire the portrait in the hallway, sit down for a holiday meal, or even type a prompt into your computer. Ask yourself, what's waiting just beyond the light? Sleep well, listeners, if you can. Thank you for listening to Scary Stories Told in the Dark, a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcast Network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com to learn more about our network and our other amazing storytelling programs. Tonight's program was hosted and its featured stories performed by yours truly, Malcolm Blackwood. Selected stories have been adapted with the kind permission of the respective authors. Original music provided by Eric Peabody, host and narrator of the Horror Hill podcast. Sound design, mixing, and mastering provided by Aaron Sawicki. Program artwork and logo by Craig Groshek. Got a scary tale of your own that you'd like performed? Well, I take submissions. Email it to me today at malcolm@simplyscarypodcast.com to have your terrifying tome considered for production in a future episode of this show. That's malcolm@simplyscarypodcast.com. If you've enjoyed what you heard on tonight's program and are joining us on your favorite podcast app, subscribe to us to be sure you never miss an episode, and leave a 5-star review and a comment. Your feedback means a lot to me. You can also follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and yours truly on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter, to connect anytime and get the latest updates on this and other programs. If you're listening on the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights YouTube channel, do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon for ctfdn as well, to get more spooky tales from me and the crew, and another episode of this program each and every Sunday. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and tell us how we're doing, and leave a kind word or request. Don't forget to visit us at chillingtalesfordarknights.com and consider supporting the team by becoming a patron. In addition to helping us out, you'll get exclusive access to our audio archive and ad-free downloads of all your favorite stories, including those you've heard on this program. As for me, I'll be back next Sunday with more terrifying tales to keep you up all night. But that's all right. Who needs sleep anyway?